visible. It is visible.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. So yeah, Sumit, we've started. Okay. So a very good afternoon to everyone. I'm pleased to introduce to you Mr. Sandeep Sen, who will be with me in this webinar. Mr. Sen has been a serial entrepreneur, and he has led many multinational, multi-billion-dollar organizations in his more than 3 decades of his corporate career. Mr. Sen also hails from XLRI, and he has led many management teams across the globe. Right now, he's the managing director of LitmusWorld, and he's been founder of Customer First, and then the global CEO and the managing director of Aegis. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us and sharing.
Thank you, Sumit, for inviting.
And I've got with me our subject matter expert, Mahesh. Mahesh Kumar is a labor law expert, and he'll be taking us through the specifications of various aspects of the new labor laws that are going to be implemented anytime. And Mr. Sen and I will be sharing our perspectives on the relevance of those labor laws and what are the changes that are going to have an impact on the employees, on the organizations when these laws are going to be implemented. So, Mr. Sen, would you like to share your views about how from the external world the labor laws and how they are going to, why the changes was required?
Sure. So I think there are 3 things. The world is changing. The only thing constant in this world is change. So one is, for example, this huge gig economy which has come, where a lot of the startups are really this gig economy. So the labor laws have to take care of that. What about this vast unorganized sector? We talk about the organized sector, but the unorganized sector is even bigger. How can they be put under the ambit of labor laws to ensure that the workers and the people who work in the unorganized sector are also taken care of? As far as the organized sector is concerned, things like higher maternity leave, for example, or a settlement of dues in time. These are all, or even the total number of working hours. Now I think they've said 48 hours. These are all good signs. The only caution I must do is laws have to take care of labor, but they have to also ensure that the economic growth of the organization also works in tandem. And I'm sure we'll discuss some of the issues today, is that how can we work both together, ensure that there are good labor laws which take care of labor, but at the same time, they don't affect economic growth. They don't hurt the growth of companies, because if companies don't grow, then you don't hire in the first place. So if there is no hiring, then what labor are we talking about? So I think the key point when we discuss minimum wages and other things, even the breakup of how the government is looking at salaries, we want to see that it's a harmonious blend of taking care of labor and also looking at the growth of industry. So,
Sure. Thank you so much, and it's so relevant in today's world that because of the changing times, that how the laws have to change to align to keep up with the new workforce challenges that are there, and the kind of workforce changes that are happening in the corporate world and at a larger place in India. So, thank you so much. Mahesh, I'll request you to start with the presentation, and then we can share our perspectives. And also, when we are approaching last 10 to 12 minutes, we will also have audience questions so that we can clarify some of the areas where our audience have any questions on.
Sure, Sumit. I'll start sharing the screen. Hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon once again to everyone. And myself, Mahesh, from SME team of TeamLease. And this is today we are going to touch upon the CEO perspective in terms of the code on social security, which is one of the labor code has been introduced by the government of India, wherein, yeah, as you are all are aware that the codes, labor codes are not yet implemented, and anytime it's going to get implemented, and shortly it will be notified by the department. So coming to the labor law landscape, which I have like elaborated here, like how the existing, how many sections we have existing. Like there are 29 labor acts have been subsumed under this 4 codes, labor codes. So these 29 labor the acts, legislations are having approximately 1 to 3 sections, like 1232 sections, wherein that has been reduced, like introducing this labor codes, 4 labor codes that has been reduced to 480 to do a ease of doing business in India. So that's when the government has taken an initiative to introduce this new labor codes, which are the 4 codes which I'm going to show you to in the subsequent slide. As I mentioned, 4 labor codes. What all these 4 labor codes are is code on social, on occupational health and safety. There are 13 acts have been subsumed here, which I have cited here. There are 13 acts. The central legislation have been subsumed. Coming to code on industrial relation, there are 3 acts, which is trade union, industrial employment standing orders, and industrial dispute. There are 3 acts. The central legislation have been subsumed here. And code on social security, there are 9 acts. Now today we are going to touch upon on the code on social security. We are going to see what all the changes are going to take place from the existing, whatever now existing, what we have: Employee Compensation Act, Employee State Insurance, Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act, Employment Exchange, Maternity, Payment of Gratuity, and Building and Other Construction. What all the existing provisions? The existing provisions will go, and in addition to that, what all the major changes which are going to take place, how it is going to impact the industries, how it is going to impact the employees in terms of working conditions or in terms of the financial commitment. So these are all things which we are going to discuss in brief today in today's webinar. Coming to code on wages, there are 4 acts have been subsumed, which is payment of wages, minimum wages, payment of bonus, and equal remuneration.
Right.
Now move on to the code on.
Mahesh, just if you can be there.
Yes.
On the slide, the last slide. So if we see that, there are certain codes which are as dated as 1923, like the Employees Compensation Act, and some of the codes on industry relations, like the Trade Unions Act, which is 1926. So, so Mr. Sen, so these codes may be relevant at that point in time, but really, in today's context, this becomes a very, very dated, this is pre-independence era. I mean, 23, I mean, almost 100 years now that Employee Compensation Act, we are following that. So your views on this?
No, this is something which is more broad-based than even labor. A lot of acts in India are very old and they haven't been revised. I'll give you a big example. The Indian Police Act, which governs the entire, all the law and justice in this country, is the Act of 1861. And today we are in 2022. So you're absolutely right. I think the government that way is doing a good thing. What was relevant in 1923, the conditions in 1923 are not relevant in 2022, which is almost 100 years. And therefore, it is important that these acts are revised. These acts are made relevant. These acts are made current. These acts cater to people working in the modern workforce. So I think that is important. Absolutely.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Mahesh, I think we can.
I'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah.
So coming to code on social security 2020. So as I mentioned, these are all nine the acts have been subsumed. Coming to Employees Provident Fund, here we are going to discuss on what all changes, and the description and how it's going to get impacted. Now coming to the applicability part, section 1.4, it clarifies that the PF eligibility, as we all are aware that now the applicability is 20 or more employees. There is no change in the employees wherein there is a change in the specific to the industry. Industry specification has been like notified by the EPFO. There are 194 industries, like 194 industries, the categories have been uploaded in the EPFO portal. So only such 194 industries are going to be come under the purview of Employees Provident Fund, wherein now that particular industry specification has been removed. Now it's going to be all industries are going to come under the ambit of Employees Provident Fund. This is one of the major change which they have introduced in the Social Security Code. So the second point, which is related to wage ceiling, which is again a section 2 and 26. So no wage ceiling has been prescribed. As we all are aware that the ceiling is 15,000. The capping has been fixed under the PF is 15,000, wherein in the code, they have stated in terms of the EDLI scheme and the EPS scheme, wherein the EPF part, they are silent. Like the code has not stated anything. However, we'll have to wait how the department like EPFO, Central Provident Fund, is going to notify us whether they are going to cap it to 15,000 or they wanted to bring it more number of employees under the PF ambit, which shall be notified with the Central Provident Fund team, like department shortly, like after the announcement of the code implementation. So this is one more change which they have defined in the code. And determination number of employees for applicability. The applicability employees whose wages more than, now as I mentioned, the capping was there. Anybody whose like capping is more than 15,000, they're not going to come under the ambit of Employees Provident Fund since their wages is more than 15,000, and if it is a first time employment. So that also has not been defined in the act. That's when we are interpreting that the PF is going to be applicable for all the employees. But however, as I mentioned, I have reiterated that the ceiling capping has to be notified by the Central Provident Fund team. So coming to the exclusion will remain same. Even today, the apprentices have been excluded under the ambit of Employees Provident Fund, and which will continue to this position will continues. And condition for exemption. So there is a provision under EPF where the establishment can go for a trust, like they can form a trust having 20 and more employees. The EPF applicability is 20 and more. So there was no as such threshold for you to go for an exemption or to avail an exemption or obtain an exemption from the department. So there was no as such threshold currently, wherein in the code it is mentioned that 100 and more. When you have 100 and more employees, then you can go for exemption. Otherwise, the exemption will not be applicable until you reach the threshold. So these are all the major changes which have been like notified in the Social Security Code. Sumit and Sandeep would like to add any like your views in this slide?
Sure. I think with the EPF covering all the employees, it would have a very important change for the existing employees, especially in the unorganized sector, who were not covered under the EPF scheme, and the benefits of the scheme were not being passed on to these employees. Though that's going to be a major change here. Mr. Sen, as per you, how will this affect the corporate employees?
So look, there are two things. One is they are trying to cover as many people under EPF. So they are saying it should apply to 20 or more. And most companies are 20 or more. They've removed the wage ceiling, so they want more and more people to cover, which is not a bad thing per se, because Provident Fund is almost like a saving that you can get. The only thing is that you see, and maybe we will come to it later, but there is a technical point that I only want to add, Sumit, and I know I'm getting into a little bit in the weeds. Employees typically at the lower end are concerned with what is take home. What is the money that they get in hand? Now, if the PF that they have to pay is more, for example, the government says that, look, basic has to be 50% of your total salary. Currently, basic is 30%, 40%, depends on companies. And as you know that the employee has to pay 12% for PF. Of course, the company matches. But if the basic goes up, the PF goes up, that the employee also contributes. And the employee, therefore, while it's great for him because the company matches, and at the end, he gets a nest egg for his retirement or when he leaves, but currently he gets a lower thing at hand. So there has always been a bit of a tussle between organizations and the government by saying, look, the employees are saying that we're getting lower and they want more at hand. And therefore, that is always a bit of a gray area. But in general, covering more people under PF, by removing the exemptions or by saying that there is no wage ceiling, I think is a good thing, because India doesn't really have a strong social security network like the US. And the Provident Fund is a great social security network. So to that extent, I think this is a step in the right direction.
Great. I think absolutely. And it's like it's going with the government philosophy of sabka saath, sabka vikas in terms of inclusiveness of the entire workforce, which is there to whatever extent it is possible.
Sure.
Thank you. So
I'll
Mahesh,
move on to the next slide.
Yeah.
So coming to ESIC, the major changes is one of the changes voluntary coverage. So under PF, we have a provision to go for voluntary coverage like PF applicability, which is 20 or more employees. In case if you have less than 20, yes, there is an option for an employer to go for a voluntary coverage. So that voluntary coverage provision was not available in ESIC. It was not like this provision was not there. Now, under the code, this provision has been introduced. That's when even if like the establishments are having less than 10 employees can go for a voluntary coverage. So looking at to cover more number of employees to bring them under the medical coverage, like the benefit. So the government has taken the initiative and they have extended the voluntary coverage under ESIC as well. And another major impact which is related to plantation. Plantation can go for a voluntary coverage under ESIC scheme for the workers employed. Even plantation can go for a voluntary coverage. This was not there in the existing ESIC provisions. Hazardous also another change is hazardous life-threatening establishment. So such establishment, if they're having even one employee, where central government can notify that they have to go for an ESIC coverage. So they are going to make it mandatory in case if the industry hazardous in nature and life-threatening in nature, those establishments even having one employee has to go for ESIC coverage. This is one more the major change which they have brought in. And wage ceiling. The wage ceiling, as we all are again, wage ceiling is 21,000 shall continue till such time the ESIC department will notify in case if they wanted to remove the threshold. If they are going to remove the threshold, then the ESIC applicability is going to be based on the wage what has been defined under the code on wages. The 50% of the wage, like out of the gross remuneration, 50% should be the wage. So that's when the ESIC applicability will come into the picture. But however, the threshold part, even the code is silent. Code did not specify the threshold, and they have given the empowerment to the central government to notify whether to continue with the 21 or there will be an increase or they may. I don't think so. They are not going to remove because they wanted to cover only certain people under the ESIC ambit. That is the point number 4. Coming to the point number 5, which is related to accident while commuting. There are certain, like in case of accident arising out of during the course of employment, it is very clearly, or they brought more clarity in terms of how, in case a person is traveling from residence to the office or office to residence, how he is commuting, whether he's commuting by his own vehicle or is commuting with the company vehicle, or probably he's commuting in a kind of other private the transportation. So all these have been elaborated in the code, and they have given a more clarity how in case if the accident has to be considered during the course of employment, which is not there. Now they have considered and they have like illustrated or elaborated all this the commutation part, which is very, very clearly articulated in the existing code.
Sure.
I'll just complete this 7 points under the ESIC, then we can go for your views, Sumit. And coming to employer failed to cover, another very, very important here is the in case. There are certain industry unorganized like industries or maybe a small scale industries where they will not cover employees immediately as and when they join. And in case if any accident occurs or if employees would like to get the benefit from the ESIC department, even they have not been allotted with the ESIC IP number, insured person number has not been allotted, still such employees can go to ESIC and get the benefit. This is one of the important benefit which has been extended to the employees and they can get the benefit showing maybe their appointment letter or any other document proof which says that the employee is working in the organization. And in case further, if yes, like the employer has not covered under the ESIC, then ESIC is going to recover the expenses which they have, like expenditure on the employee, whatever they have spent on the employee. So the amount will be recovered from the employer. So that's when what happened, employer is going to be very cautious in terms of generation of IP as and when employee joins. So this is one of the important thing which they have introduced. And coming to the coverage extended to the mines. As of now, the Mines Act is not covered under the ESIC ambit. Now the mines will also be covered under the ESIC purview. So these are all the major changes in terms of the ESIC. I'll just move on to the previous slide.
Yeah.
Sumit, I think.
Yeah, sure. So, Mahesh, if you can just elaborate on the point number 1, the voluntary coverage. So, what does it mean for the employer pre era where these codes were not, and once these codes will be implemented, how does it? If you can just elaborate a bit.
ESIC applicability comes now. They have given the empowerment to the each state. Now, many of the states, the ESIC coverage is 10 or more employees. If the establishment is having 10 or more employees, only the ESIC is going to be applicable. In case if my establishment having 5 employees, where those 5 employees also come in under the ESIC ceiling, which is 20,000 less or 21,000 less. If there's wages less than 21,000, I can cover them under ESIC. Wherein now currently I don't have provision. I can't go for a voluntary coverage how it is available in PF. So until unless I cross 10 or more employees, I'll not be able to get the ESIC registration done, or I'll not be coming under the ambit of ESIC. Wherein that provision has been, now the new provision has been introduced, where voluntary coverage, you can voluntarily get covered under the ESIC in case if you have less than 10 employees. Either 1, 2, 3, whatever number of employees you have less than 10, you can proceed and get your registered under the ESIC and cover employees, whoever is coming under the ambit of ESIC, which is a wage ceiling. So we can cover them under the ESIC.
Sure. Mr. Sen, your thoughts on this, these changes on ESIC, because that's really impacting the bottom of the pyramid employees.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think this is certainly very welcome. The aim is that everybody in this country should get medical help. And therefore, I think what the government has done is that it is trying to increase the coverage of everybody. Even if you have less than 10 employees, the employer can ask for voluntary coverage. Even if it's a very small thing, even if you have 2 employees, you can do that, number 1. Number 2, the wage ceiling has been raised. I remember when we were running our BPO at the beginning, the wage ceiling for ESIC was 7,500. Now it's made 21,000. So you cover more and more people. But the one which is the most heartening is the fact that even if the company has not paid for whatever reason, the company is not doing well or company has some trouble, the employee can still go and get the, get his checkup and get his health done at the ESIC hospital. And later on, the ESIC will cover the benefits from the employer. So I think all of this is to increase coverage to get universal health care. So I think this is very, very welcome. The only caveat I would add is that I've been to many ESI hospitals. I think the ESI hospitals are really improving, but I think some more needs to be done. Why do people go to private hospitals? So I would like the ESI hospitals, the government to ensure there are minimum standards at the ESIC hospital so that everybody can get the benefit. But overall, I think this is a very welcome move to ensure that, because healthcare, Sumit, as you know, is a right. It is not just that we have to give in. So the government is saying that everybody should have access to healthcare. So this is welcome. I just want that maybe some ESI hospitals, ESIC hospitals should do even better.
Sure. Absolutely, Mr. Sen, because because not only the coverage but also the quality of healthcare has to be will achieve the real result and will take the actual benefits to the last mile. Absolutely. So this ESIC changes seems to be in the favor of the employees, and especially to the employees who are really in need, whether or not the employer has actually given extended those benefits till the very end. So I think this is a very welcome move from the government.
Sure.
I'll move on to the gratuity. So gratuity, now fixed term workers have come under the ambit of the gratuity. Now gratuity is applicable who has put in the continuous service of 5 years. that's when the gratuity is going to be applicable for employees, wherein fixed term workers also are going to come under the ambit irrespective of their number of years. In case if I'll take an example of where I have like establishments have engaged the fixed term workers for the 2 years. So this proportionate basis, like prorated basis, the gratuity has to be paid for such fixed term workers as well for the fixed term period, which is for the 2 years. So this is the new the addition to the Gratuity Act, wherein currently this position is not available, or it is only people who have completed the 5 years of service. Another point, which is a working journalist, is also coming under the ambit of the gratuity, where the benefit will be extended to such working journalists as well. As I mentioned, in case if they have been engaged for the 3 years, so they are eligible for the gratuity. For those 3 years, pro rata basis has to be paid the gratuity. So another important here is interest for the delayed payment of the gratuity. So there's no clarity interest, like employer has to pay interest on a gratuity payable in case if it is delayed for more than 30 days, wherein they have not stated why there is a delay. This delay is happened because of employer or because of employee, wherein in existing provision, it says that in case anything which is beyond 30 days, then employer is liable to pay a simple rate of 10% or 12%, which is been notified by the central government. Wherein now here very clearly stated, in case if there is any delay or fault has happened from the employee end, then interest is not required to pay by the employer, wherein the employer has to document it from the controlling authority. He has to get a written permission from the controlling authority, and that's when the employer is not liable to pay the interest for the delayed days, which is because of the fault at the employee end.
Sure.
Anything? These are all the major change which I would like to highlight.
So essentially, the working journalists and are covered for 3 years of continuous service. So, Mr. Sen, what do you think this will impact? Will more and more people now come in the workforce? Will be more encouraged to come in the workforce with a non-permanent kind of a agreement because they will be then covered under the Gratuity Act, or it will be the same?
No, this is helpful because you see, gratuity was paid for 5 continuous years of service, and you and I have seen that. Now, suppose I hire somebody for 3 years only, and I said, look, your job is for 3 years, in which case he misses out on gratuity. So now what they're saying is that, look, you can hire people on fixed term for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year contracts, but you have to pay them proportionately. So if he is 3 years, you pay them 60%. So that ensures that other people are also able to get gratuity. So I think, again, what I can see one standard, thread, one standard sutradhar flowing through this is the government says we must increase coverage of Provident Fund, increase coverage of ESIC, and now increase coverage of gratuity. So gratuity was a good thing, but the only thing was that if you work less than 5 years continuous, then you would not get gratuity. And now they're saying, fine, we'll take you for a fixed term, but you will not miss out. That was one of the things he was missing out. You will not miss out. Again, I think this is a good thing. And it just ensures that the discrimination between permanent employees and fixed term employees is reduced. So I would say that this is both interesting and a good policy.
Sure. And with your, because you've led teams and you led companies, conglomerates across the globe, do you see that, these 3 things, PF, ESIC, gratuity, or their equivalent of the developed nations, are we moving towards that, or is this something which is very unique, or we are just correcting the course that we had to correct because our laws are as dated as, say, about 100 odd years?
I think we are doing 2 things. One is we are correcting our laws, which are dated, and India really doesn't have a full social security. Like in the US, they have a social security. In Europe, for example, you're aware European countries have strong social security networks. India doesn't have a government service. Earlier, there was this pension, but otherwise, where is the social security here? So here, what the government is trying to do is that they're following, frankly, what is there in many other countries, particularly in the West, by trying to create a social security framework, by saying, look, more people eligible for PF. So PF, when you retire, you get a lump sum, or when you leave service. Number two, ESIC, that at least guarantees medical health to anybody who's working, and gratuity, again, to increase the ambit of gratuity. So these are all social security measures, and these were required because India, in the private sector, in the unorganized sector, there was no social security per se. And what happens when a guy retires after the age of 58? How does he fend for himself? So to your question, you're absolutely right. It's both to amend laws which are very old and to go in the direction of providing much more and more social security as countries in the West have done.
Sure. Many thanks, Mr. Sen. Because now that we are moving towards a scenario where the organized and the unorganized workforce and the people who are coming in the workforce will be one of the largest across the world, and therefore to take care of that workforce, to ensure that our workforce is motivated, is taken care of, and it's doing whatever they're supposed to do on the job. I think these three things will be very, very pertinent with the changes. And yes, our people who are employed, we should not feel that they are getting anything less than what their counterparts in the developed nations or in other nations are getting. So we are moving step by step closer to that.
Right. Yep.
Yes. On to the maternity benefit. The MB Act, the establishment which are already notified by the central government shall continue to be covered. Here, the educational institution has been introduced in the code, like under the Maternity Benefit Act. The educational institutions will come under the purview of the Maternity Benefit Act. And another, the creche facilities. There was an ambiguity when you refers to the ESIC, under the ESIC, where in case if ESIC is covered, the establishments are not required to extend the benefit of creche, where there was a major ambiguity here. The interpretation from the authority perspective, wherein that the interpretation has been removed here. Very clearly, they have stated that creche shall be applicable where 50 or more employees have been engaged by the establishment. So the clarity they have provided, there is a better clarity which has been provided in the code. And the financial commitment, now where many companies are saying that our establishment has covered under the ESIC, that's when we are like creche is not going to be applicable. So this particular interpretation or the ambiguity was there, like currently it is available, like which is there. So that has been removed in this, like under the social security, very clearly stated. Coming to maternity benefit, the maternity benefit for medical bonus for both can be deprived if women is dismissed or discharged for any gross misconduct, like maternity benefit being extended to for a women employee in case of any gross misconduct. This has been prescribed in the code very clearly, and it is also stated that this can be deprived. The benefit can be deprived, extending the benefit to the women employee, and even the medical bonus, which is being paid 3,500 currently. So even medical bonus also will be deprived. These are all the major changes which have under the Maternity Benefit Act.
I think this is a mixed advantage for employers as well as the employees. Certainly there are the creche facility will have the financial implication going up for the employers. However, for the employees, they can without too much worrying about what is happening at the home, they can because if this facility is there nearby to the offices, it will be helpful. It will be motivational for the women, more and more women employees to join the active workforce. Certainly. So, Mr. Sen, what your thoughts? Because we've spent decades and decades in BPM. So this is certainly going to impact in a very positive way.
Absolutely. One of the things that is an issue in India is that our participation of women in the workforce have actually fallen. And as you rightly said, BPM was always an exception. In our BPM business process management or BPO, the number of women was as much as men, sometimes more. And one of the reasons that the women, the percentage of women in the workforce in India have fallen is the fact is that once a woman has kids, it is difficult for her to do both. And therefore, this whole issue of creche, I think, is a wonderful idea because it enables the participation of women in the workforce, even if they have children, and particularly when they have small children who cannot be left at home. And I think this is a welcome move because, you know, uh, that's one of the things I've noticed while the country has been developing and growing, the participation of women in the workforce has declined. And I think these are methods to help. So I think this is a very welcome method.
Sure. Mr. Sen. Thank you.
I would like to touch upon in this slide related to the appropriate government. So gratuity, maternity and employment exchange, the central government would be the appropriate government in case the establishment having branches more than one state. But when it comes to shops and establishment where gratuity is going to be a central when you have, wherein under factories, it is a state is going to be an appropriate government, wherein now they have brought in the ambit of central government in case if any establishment having more branches more than one state. So there's one change which is in respect of the factories. The employee compensation, the appropriate government definition was not available, wherein now they have clearly stated what is appropriate government, and the clarity has been provided. So another major change which is related to employee compensation is funeral, the expenditure, which is 15,000. They have stated funeral expenditure, which is 15,000. In addition to ESIC, like under ESIC, even the funeral expenditure or expenses, which is being paid to the family, the surviving member of the family, the 15,000 being extended. Wherein under the employee compensation, currently it is 5,000. So they have matched the number, which is 15,000 to the as per the ESIC provisions under the Employee Compensation Act.
Sure. What I will request is, as we are almost 40 minutes into the webinar, I will request if any participants have any questions, they can start, putting it in the chat box. And then towards the end of the webinar, before we complete, we will try and answer as many as possible in the webinar itself. Please, Mahesh, please continue.
Yes, I'll go ahead. This is related to the BOCW, which I would like to highlight the applicability part. Under section 2, subsection 6, the applicability part, they have stated 10 or more workers. 10 or more workers coming under the building and other construction workers are going to, like this act is going to be, this chapter. Actually, in the code, it is called as a chapter. This chapter is going to be applicable where 10 or more workers in the preceding 12 months. And another major change is the residential construction. In case of the residential construction, the building and other construction worker act is applicable, wherein currently it is 10 lakhs. Now the threshold has been increased to 50. They have increased the ceiling up to 50. So when we go for the residential construction, the building and other construction worker act is going to be applicable if the construction value is 50 and above. The employment exchange, there's one major change which I am highlighting it here. Currently the employment exchange act is going to be applicable where it is 25 or more employees, wherein now they have reduced the number. Threshold limit has been reduced now, which is going to be at 20. So they wanted to cover more establishment under the purview of employment exchange act. So one more important thing which I would like to highlight in this slide is the limitation of the assessment. Under PF, even today, PF has not prescribed what is the assessment or inspection can go on. In case if establishment is existing since 10 years, the department having the empowerment to inspect the records or to assess the records from the date of inception of the code as well as the establishment. So there is no prescribed the time limit prescribed under the PF, wherein now under the code it has been prescribed the limitation is going to be 5 years. Beyond 5 years, the authority is not having any empowerment to seek for the document. So it is going to be like assessment is going to happen only for 5 years. Now currently under ESIC it is prescribed as a 5 years, wherein under the PF which is not prescribed. So now after the code implementation, the assessment is going to happen only for 5 years in respect of PF ESIC. what the role of inspector is changed to a inspector cum facilitator. He should facilitate like employer in terms of collating the documents or guiding employer in case of any deviation, anything as such. That they have very clearly elaborated what is the role of inspector, and they have called it as a inspector cum facilitator. This is one of the important thing which they have stated as an inspector. Now they'll be like, maybe we all have noticed how inspector is going to react in terms of any non-compliances. So now they have stated this has to be like properly deal with the employer, talk to employer, make him understand where is the deviation, how to like rectify or regularize the non-compliances. So this is how the inspector has to like he has to behave with the employer. So they have very clearly stated that inspector come the facilitator.
Sure. So,
And
yeah.
yes,
Please,
you can.
Please, Mahesh, you can complete the slide, then we will share.
Yeah. Yes, I'll complete. So they have also stated in the code is provide the penalty for different types of violation. Now what happens if you refer our acts? Now currently acts, it says the contravention of the act, it is going to be either the penalty or imprisonment or both. These three categories are there. Now imprisonment the clause has been reduced, and they have not stated for entire act and each and every where the major the non-compliance, the major activity which employer has to ensure. That's when they have given the violation and penalty clause has been introduced, wherein instead of they have reduced the imprisonment clause, wherein they have increased the penalty, which now penalty in many of the acts it is going to be 2,000 like 10,000, or it's going to be a bit more, wherein now it is stated 50,000, 1 lakh, even 1.5 lakh, the penalty clauses has been increased. So penalty, they have like significantly increased here. The compounding offense also introduced under the code, like employer can go and plea, or they can request, and if they can justify why there is a delay or non-compliance appropriately, where the compounding offenses has been introduced. And this last point I would like to highlight here, this is the only section 142 under social security has already been implemented, and there was a notification served by the EPFO where they made Aadhaar as a mandatory for generation of UN. Without Aadhaar, we will not be able to generate UN, and this is the only section as per the code which has been implemented currently. Yes, Sumit, you can take it up.
Thanks. So what we see is that this entire labor, the new labor codes which are coming in, they are not only employee friendly, but also the employer doesn't need to be too much worried about the aspect of getting the compliance done, because there are now consultants, and there are now organized corporates who are available for them to comply to these new labor codes. Also, the kind of role of the inspectors or the role of the authorities that have become more collaborative rather than only enforcing, or only with a one-sided view that was traditionally being played by the authorities. So, Mr. Sen, do you think that this will ease out and bring more and more people on the compliance track than it was earlier because of the collaborative thought process of the government?
No, absolutely. Look, you want people to comply with the laws, but you don't want to Inspector Raj. And what was happening with a lot of these PF officials, it was Inspector Raj. You were taking cases 10 years, 12 years back. So this is what I was saying, that yes, you need to comply with provisions, but it should not be at the cost of economic development. So here I think the government has done a good thing, and here I must compliment that by saying, as you rightly said, he has become a facilitator and not an inspector. Otherwise, there was always fear of imprisonment, and and sometimes the people in the department were not the right people, and there was a lot of harassment. So I think this has changed from harassment to collaboration. And I can tell you, the corporate sector in particular wants to comply, and you will see compliance happening much more. So I think this is very welcome, where both work together, both ensure that the provisions are complied with, and the Inspector Raj and the harassment stops.
Sure. Many thanks, Mr. Sen. And the companies which are helping the other companies to comply are also have also changed their IT systems and their processes to see that these all collaborative measures are furthered, and both the departments which are responsible for this compliances, as well as the corporates and the employees, are benefited at large when we are implementing and rolling out these labor laws.
That is true. Absolutely.
Sure. Right. Mahesh, I think you can progress.
I think, Sumit, we can take a question and answer session.
Certainly. So we have 5 questions till now, and participants can ask more questions also. Rishi, will you bring out the questions so that Mahesh can answer them?
No, I'll read out. I think I stopped sharing it. I'll start reading it.
Sure.
Under MB cash to be provided where 50 or more employees or female employees. No, it is employees.
Sorry to interrupt, Mahesh. Maybe if you could read the question out loudly for everyone.
I'll read out. There's a first question which has been raised by Chandrasekhar Padhya. It's under maternity creche to be provided where 50 or more employees or female employees. It's very clearly stated that 50 or more employees. It's not about the female employees. Why they have brought in the more employees is even male employee will have a kid in case if mother because of uncertainty, or if mother is not able to take up the kid, even the male employee can bring their kids to the establishment and where the creche facility has to be extended. So that's when they have stated it's employees, not they have not bifurcated it's male or female as such. The coming to the question number 2, Sanjay Bharadwaj, under the new social security code, gig workers will be covered under the ESIC or not. Gig workers also, like unorganized workers, also have been brought in under the ambit of ESIC. The third question, how should we structure our salaries so that basic component is 50% of CTC? This is actually a very I'll not be able to tell you now that we have to. What I would like to suggest is here, make sure your gross remuneration, out of your fixed gross remuneration, you're going to have 50% of your wage. Remaining 50% you can go as an exclusion. They have stated in the definition that exclusion can go up to 50%, but not beyond 50%. So that's when the wage is going to be 50%. So make sure that 50%. So you don't go with the CTC concept. We have to go with the gross remuneration or fixed gross remuneration concept.
Yeah. And Arvind, in this specific to your organization, if you require any kind of a expert support, we have a team who can collaborate with you and who can help you with your pay elements and pay components, so that the new salary structures are aligned to the labor laws, to the new labor codes, so that even before anytime they are implemented, your organization is ready with the revised structures, and not only the structures but also the systems, as well as the challans and all those compliances which are required as per the new labor codes.
Yes, absolutely, Sumit. Yes, we can definitely support you, Arvind, in terms of restructuring your salary as per the code on wages. So Hariprasad, in case of gratuity, Hariprasad has raised a query. In case, okay, it's jumping. In case of gratuity, where threshold of 5 years restriction removed if employees works for 3 months in a company and leaves his eligibility for gratuity. The gratuity they brought in only the fixed term workers, otherwise not for your full-time employees. Full-time employees, they have to put the 5 years of continuous service, wherein for fixed term workers alone, since they have been engaged for 2 years and 3 years, where they'll not be able to continue to work in an organization for 5 years. So that's when they have brought in the fixed term workers under the ambit of gratuity, so that for their fixed term, they are eligible for the gratuity. Okay, Subramani has raised from DXE new wage code with the effect from date state-wise. It is different implementation date for the impact date for Pan India. The implementation it's going to happen together. I don't think so. It is going to happen based on the state specific. So this we will have to wait how the central government is going to confirm on this when they are going to implement the code. After central code implementation, then the states are going to start implementing it. Yes, I see coverage. If
Mahesh, if you can be a bit loud, this thing, so that everyone knows the question, so they can.
Yeah. One more question is related to ESIC coverage. There is a discussion about slab increase 25,000. There was a discussion, but we have not got any clarity on the enhancement of the ceiling from 21,000 to 25. But as of now, there was a discussion under the PF, not on the ESIC. PF front, the wage ceiling is 15,000 is currently, wherein they are planning to increase to 21,000, where ESIC ceiling is also 21 and bonus ceiling threshold is also 21. So another question is a limitation period to settle. If employer resigns in 1 year, employer not to pay interest if employee fault. What are all the fault? That will be notified by the central government, which very clearly stated what all things to be considered as a fault from the employee side, which will be notified accordingly. We will have to consider that as a fault from the employee. PF no wage ceiling preferred for PF and EPS and EDLI now 15K. The question is not clear, but still I'll try to clarify. The wage ceiling is currently, it is 15,000, which is for all three, PF, EPS and EDLI, but wherein the code is not defined the ceiling perspective. Ceiling they have not stated. So wherein they have stated that the central government will notify whether they are going to continue with the PF ceiling, or if they are not going to notify, then the PF is going to be applicable for all employees without any threshold. One more question, the turnaround time for FNF processing in 2 working days from his last working day, is it inclusive of payment transferred to? Yes. Whatever way, whether it is being transferred or it is stated the bank, it has to be happened through bank transfer, and FNF has to be settled within 2 working days from the last day of the employee. Coming to Preeti Kaushik, is there a term period specified for the delay in gratuity? The delay has been prescribed. No, it shouldn't be delayed beyond 30 days. The gratuity has to be paid within 30 days from the date of exit of an last working day of an employee. So any delay happens beyond 30 days, the like interest, the simple rate which I have stated at 10% or the 12% which has been stated, like central government has been notified. Any other questions? I think I have covered all the questions, whatever has available in the chat box. I'll again rush through from the beginning in case if I missed it something. Can maternity benefit be merged with the work from home? Like allowing work from home instead, one more question which I could see here, can maternity benefit be merged with the work from home, like allowing work from instead of maintaining a creche facility and declaring the same under the Maternity Benefit Act? See, under the maternity amendment in 2017, they have stated, yes, you can allow employee, even after providing 26 weeks of maternity benefit extending to the women employee, post that in case if their nature of work, which will suits for the establishment where women employee can work from home, yes, you can extend. But we cannot correlate with the creche facility, because creche facility which has to be extended within the radiation of 500 meters to the establishment. When women employees coming, we have to provide. Maybe looking at that creche facility, we can't deprive. Like you can't allow all employees to work from home. Again, it depends upon the nature of your business and how it is going to suits for your industry. Any change in employee compensation policy? As I mentioned, the employee compensation policy, there's no change, but they have mentioned about the appropriate authority definition, and the funeral benefit has been extended from 5,000 to 15,000. Gratuity fixed term employees or duration 3 to 6 months would also be eligible for gratuity, or any minimum period is subscribed. Here, again, it is a bit of ambiguity, but however, I'll clarify. Yes, the fixed term normally we take people for 1 year or beyond 1 year, but the completion year under the gratuity, it is stated of completion of 240 working days shall be considered as a 1 year. Since you have been engaged 3 or 6 months, we would request you to consider as a 1 year as a payable period, and it is recommended to pay 1 year gratuity for 1 year in case if you are engaging any fixed term workers for 3 or 6 months.
Sure. I think we are in the last 5 minutes. So Mahesh, we can take 1 or 2 more questions, and then we will request Mr. Sen for his concluding remarks and his final thoughts on this.
Yeah, I have limitation period of 5 years of ESIC and PF preceding maintaining data records for 5 years or above. Yes, limitation of assessment or even document, like you can store the documents for 5 years. The assessment period is very clearly prescribed in the code as 5 years. But currently PF, it is not prescribed. We need to store the documents even from the date of inception in case the PF inspection has not happened so far. And the last question, which I would like to, Hari Prasad has one more question from me, is from DXC. If any particular state is not accepting any other clause in the new labor changes, will it be made mandatory and uniform for all the states irrespective of any effective date for labor code implementation? Labor code implementation, there was the press release and they were saying that the codes are going to get implemented by 1st July 2022, wherein many of the states are not published, like West Bengal, couple of union territories are, so far they have not published a single draft rules in respect of 4 labor codes. So that's when they have informed respective states to notify the draft rules. Post that the codes are going to get implemented, but probably it's not going to happen shortly. There will be ample of time, probably another 6 months. We are interpreting, so this may take 3 to 6 months time. Sumit, can I stop, or
yeah,
we are left with 3 minutes?
Yeah, we got more than 25 questions. So let us address that. Maybe, participants can reach out to us at Compliance Connect at TeamLease, and we'll try and address most of these questions, most of the responses. With this, I will request Mr. Sen to share his final views on this so that we can get his views and then take it forward from here onwards. Mr. Sen, you are on mute. You can just unmute.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I think the entire thrust of this code is very clear. You want to maximize coverage. You want as many people to be covered under PF. You want to ensure that ESIC is covered even if the employer has not paid. You want to ensure that fixed term people who are not permanent employees, their fixed term for 2 or 3 or 4 years or even 1 year gets proportional gratuity. There are crashes which are done. So I think the aim is to ensure that there is much more availability of social security net for the Indians. The question will be asked that does it increase cost for employers? Yes, it does. In some cases, increase cost. But as Sumit, you pointed out, there is an employee who will be far more motivated because he knows he is being taken care of. And to that extent, that cost factor will be nullified. That's number 2. The next point also to be noticed is that they have said that as far as compliance is concerned, the government says that we don't want an inspector Raj, we want a collaborative thing. And of course, there are now a lot of firms, including yours, which can help clients to collaborate. So I think the overall message is very clear that, look, we want to increase coverage. We want every person. We want all unorganized sector people also to be under coverage, which is a good thing. And as far as employers are concerned, we don't want it to be a license Raj. We want to collaborate with you and ensure that it goes well. Yes, there are 1 or 2 small issues which are still there. For example, eligibility under PF has not been mentioned. It is 5 years of keeping documents under ESIC, but on PF it is not there. So do you keep it from inception? When is this going to be launched? When are all the states going to put that? And this will happen over a period of time. So it has happened for GST also. It took some time. But overall, I think the thrust is very good. The thrust is certainly to help the employees. And as far as the employers are concerned, it is to ensure that whether it is PF or others, it is not an inspector Raj. but a collaborative Raj. So that would be my final comments.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Sen, and thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to share your insights and with your thought process on this very important change that is going to affect crores and crores of employees in India. And thank you all the participants. Thank you, Mahesh, and we really look forward to really collaborating with you as we go into this new era of the revised labor laws and the labor codes. So thank you, Mr. Sen. Thanks, and thank you all the participants. Again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Mr.